Hello guys and girls, this is my latest review of Unbelievable, the new Netflix crime miniseries. This is going to be episode 7, so just one more episode after this. And it's a big episode for Marie really, because she gets some counselling, but there's a nice little link between the two storylines, between what's happening with Marie, but also the two detectives, Grace and Karen. But I'll get to Marie in a few moments, just to wrap up a few things about the case, because episode 6 ended on a cliffhanger where Karen and another detective had followed who they suspected was the rapist, Christopher McDonald, I believe his name was. And they followed him and his girlfriend to this cafe, this diner type place, and they'd waited to him to leave. And then Karen got, some DNA from like his glass, like a sample. But then Grace found out that there was someone else staying in the same house, and that it was his brother. So obviously they have very similar appearances. They live in the same house, which means it could be either of them, and you've got obviously similarities. So potentially it could be either one of them. So that was the cliffhanger, if you like, at the end of episode 6. So they picked this up in this episode. So what they do is obviously they get samples from both guys to sort of run in the lab. So they pick up the other brother. His name is Curtis, I think. Curtis, I'm pretty sure. And they eventually get the right guy. And it does turn out to be Christopher after all, but obviously there was that element of doubt. And there's quite a good scene actually where they're speaking to Curtis, and he's just, I think it's Grace trying to call his bluff as well, just in case it is him, trying to really sort of shock him and maybe goad him into confessing if it is him. But Curtis is really shocked at this. He seems to have no knowledge that there was anything shady going on with his brother. But he's also very kind of balanced about it, very calm. He almost just says, well, because first of all, it's a shocking moment for him, the fact that his brother was doing this stuff and they're living in the same house. But also at the same time, he's very much, well, don't let him get away sort of thing, throw the book at him. So I guess he's saying the sort of thing you would expect maybe someone to say in that circumstance, although of course this is the guy's brother. So I guess he is going a bit out on the limb a bit. It's an impressive thing to say. But yeah, I think he's almost framing it as this is the best thing for everyone, including my brother. He's clearly very disturbed, so yeah, throw the book at him basically. So we get some really great scenes with Karen and Grace in this episode, where Karen has really been worn down by the case. She's really determined to get this, because although they've actually got the guy and they eventually get the confirmation with the DNA and what have you, it's quite a long-winded process, and then they're trying to get it kind of an airtight case so that they can put it through courts, and obviously they need a confession as well. That would really, because the DNA samples from the two brothers are virtually the same, and they're still trying to gather evidence to make it an airtight case. So there's an interesting scene. I'll actually come back to Karen and Grace in a moment, but there's an interesting scene where they're just like stripped to get the DNA sample from Christopher, that they have to strip him completely naked, and you see this scene in really agonizing detail where they're obviously taking samples, they're obviously, including, his genitalia. And it's this great role reversal where obviously in this case it's the guy who has done all, made these girls feel horrible and violated them. He essentially is being violated in this scene, and it's shot in a very cold and clinical way. It shows, how sort of calm he appears, how cold and distant he is, which I think a lot of times for someone to do these sorts of things and have that sort of mindset, they do tend to be quite cold and distant. Although there is some sort of traces of humanity in the way he carried out the crimes, but obviously a very disturbed, very sort of sick individual. But yeah, it is a role reversal type scene where it's him who's being put through the ringer, it's him who's being exposed and sort of violated in a very different way, obviously. But they're gathering evidence. They finally find some. They finally find some. There's some Polaroids. Oh, and some underwear, some girls' underwear in a suitcase in the house. So they can obviously use that as DNA, as they can get samples off the underwear and confirm that it's from the victims. And so they're slowly getting closer to like an airtight case where they can nail this guy. But yeah, they do sort of need a confession as well. That would go a long way, and that's what they don't have at the end of this episode. So Karen is getting very stressed, quite high strung, and again, a bit like Karen did in a previous episode for Grace, where she just gives her a pep talk in the G-up. There's a great moment with Grace where she just comes out and they start playing cards. She slaps the cards down on the table and they play a game of card, and it's a back and forth as they're playing cards. They're obviously talking to each other about things. And Grace, who I think is meant to be the more experienced of the two, just says to Karen, if you let the case overcome you, if you let the job become your life, so to speak, then you've lost, sort of thing. You don't have any kind of life. So it's just this great pep talk, this great pick-me-up for Karen, and they play cards. So it's a nice little visual scene again, and a smart little trick from Grace just to be a bit more playful and get Karen on side and kind of, relax her, sort of thing. And Grace does have these little touches. So in the episode, she kind of says to Karen, I can't make the arrest. I need you to go and make the arrest. This is your case. So Karen makes the arrest. And again, it's just Grace. I suspect she's making that part up. I think it's just her giving this moment to Karen, because she's seen how stressed Karen has been, how down she's been, and it's just this thing she's giving her, this big moment, almost like a moment in the spotlight. I think it's fair to say no one has worked harder on the case than Karen. So Grace just gives her this chance to shine, this chance to really, it's a cathartic thing, because once Karen arrests the guy, it's a big deal for her, and it's a release of emotions almost. It's her big moment in the spotlight, if you like, in the most the most humanistic sort of way. But then Karen gets all these congratulations from other cops, in the precinct, and all people giving her praise, and it's a great thing. You really feel happy for Karen. I think earning, true respect from your peers in that sort of profession, or any in a way, there's nothing better, and it's something Karen really deserves because of the way she's worked on the case so tirelessly. And it is beautiful to see. There's also a scene with Grace and her husband. Obviously, they've had a bit of a falling out over the whole, her wanting him to get hit, give her access to files and that for the case. And eventually he caved and gave her the Massey file, the James Massey file, which turned out to be a dead end, although Massey, as they point out, does have a very dodgy past. And so there's a nice coming together here where Grace kind of offers the fact that it was probably wrong for you to give me the Massey file, or for me to ask for it. And her husband actually reassures her and says, well, no, it wasn't, because Massey is terrible. So however he phrases it, Massey is really dodgy, and he really needs to be taken off the street, sort of thing. So he phrases it like that. So it's this idea that even though Massey wasn't the guy behind these rapes, he's still a terrible human being. He still has committed offences, and because of the system being corrupt in this case, he's sort of gotten away with them. But the husband is reassuring Grace and saying, we do need to get this guy off the streets. So that's a great scene and a nice sort of moment. So great stuff again with Karen and Grace. But Marie in some ways takes the big moments of the episode. So they've obviously gotten her off the charge of, false reporting to do with the whole, rape thing, and then taking it back. And there's been certain conditions, and one of them is she must see a counsellor. And the counsellor, actually, the actress, I do recognise, but I can't think what I've seen her in. I've seen her in a couple of different things, I think. But anyway, so Marie has a counsellor which she goes to, and I think there's a nice little link here between Karen and Marie, or I mean Karen and Grace in some ways, but probably more so Karen in this episode, in the sense that they both need someone to talk to, someone to listen to them. Because Marie has been through this whole deal where a lot of, apart from maybe Connor and one or two others, has, no one's really listened to her. Everyone's judged her and made her life all the more difficult. And it's counselling, and in a way it's saying we all need counselling sometimes, or we all need at least someone to listen to us. As we see, Grace is just there for Karen. So again, the two stories are nicely sort of linked together, and in some ways, because it's Karen who started all this with the pursuing the case and what have you, and eventually we're going to bring the two sides together with Marie and Karen. So they are effectively the two bookends, if you like, of the whole drama. So it makes sense, and this is kind of a thematic link in this episode with the counselling. So we see a few different scenes with Marie and the counsellor. And in the first one, she's sort of, she's very cynical about seeing a counsellor. She doesn't think it will do her any good. She's nervous about it. And she gives her, she says, I've been in the system for years and nothing but bad things have happened. And she's just very negative about interacting with a counsellor and says, there's nothing you can do to help me. And she's just cynical about, is the counsellor really on her side? Is she really there to sort of help her? So the counsellor, who I think we see quickly is on Marie's side and is there for genuine reasons. To try and break the ice, she tries to get her to talk about, because Marie has sort of put this defence thing up where she's kind of said, well, we don't have to talk, do we? And the counsellor obviously confirmed that, and so Marie decides to stay silent, but then the counsellor, to try and break the ice, again goes for something a bit lighter. So it's a bit like how Grace used the cards with Karen. So the counsellor, to break the ice, says, have you seen any good movies lately? Any good TV series? And this is obviously back in 2009. So Marie says Zombieland, who says it's quite good. And I mean, what comes from Zombieland is very fascinating, because Marie starts describing the film, and the counsellor's playing along, what's it about, which is obviously a funny moment because the title gives it away. But the counsellor, although she generally doesn't see, I'm sure that's a front, I'm sure most people know what zombies are, but the counsellor doesn't seem to know. So Marie describes what zombies are, and then she describes the plot of the film. And she does this whole sort of speech where it's about survival and it's about not trusting anyone. And she's kind of painting the humans sort of as the bad guys, and almost, saying you can understand where the zombies are coming from. And that it's just survival of the fittest, and that's a bit like the human race. So she's drawing this comparison between the metaphor of the zombies with her view on life, and how the human race is in general, if you want to think of it in those sorts of ways. So it's a start, because it gets Marie talking, and it's a way to get her talk in a lighter sort of way, but then obviously it turns a bit sort of negative, but it's at least opening up dialogue. And then eventually, nearer the end of the episode, the counsellor says to Marie, you don't have to say anything to me. And she reassures her, because obviously the subject of the rape comes up. And she says, I believe you, because I don't believe that any girl would make that sort of thing up. And that's the whole common sense thing which comes into play here, where, I mean, obviously not to say it's never happened and it's not been true. Obviously you do get false allegations, but certainly with rape, it's this particular thing where you sort of feel, well, why would a girl make that up? So the counsellor makes it clear that she believed Marie when she said she was raped. And she's very calmly putting the power in Marie's hands, saying, you don't have to say anything, but this is your time. If you would like to tell me something about that night, then I'm here to listen. We've got a few minutes left. And it's just great. It's just really heartwarming, and it just shows that there are people there who are here to listen and who care. And Marie tells her about it, and we don't actually see it, but it's after she's told her about it. And the counsellor says, thank you for telling me that. That must have been really hard. And she also says, I can't remember how she phrases it, but something about, I can't take that night back, or I can't make this any easier for you, but what I can do is help you to process it maybe a little bit. Something like that, which is the counsellor's role in a way. And it's really poignant stuff, because Marie says at one point, I feel like I've been violated twice, once by the guy who raped me, and once and then again by the system. So it's this really sharp line which really cuts to the meat of what this drama has been about, and the experience of Marie. and just how we treat victims sometimes, which is like what I said. But then it's like the significant ending of the episode where Marie is sort of asked if she had to do it again, what would she do? And it's a great scene because Marie just says, if I had to do it again, I would lie sooner, because that would just make it, much easier. And it's this idea, really, that as soon as she claimed she was lying, or as soon as she put out the fact that she wasn't raped, with the particular circumstances, with it seeming then the detectives didn't want to believe her, it just would have been a lot easier, and there would have been a lot less stress, because even if she'd gotten, the conviction and they'd accepted that she was raped, there's still a lot of trauma, there's still a lot of pressure from people around you when it comes to race. And the line which really captures what the episode is driving at, or what Marie's side is driving at, is if the truth isn't convenient, they don't want to believe you. So it's talking about life in general. And yeah, it just captures everything about some of the issues with this in society and in the legal system. And boom, it's really powerful stuff again. But it's important for Marie that she had this cathartic experience. But it also does end on a bit of a melancholic sort of downbeat line, because of the fact that Marie is so cynical, so jaded by the system, and she says she would lie sooner, sort of thing. And she really paints a vivid picture of what it's like. But great stuff. I really like the counselling scene. And of course there's one more episode left, so they're going to draw it all together, and really intriguing stuff. So that is episode 7 of Unbelievable. Please let me know your thoughts on the episode in the comments below, and just anything else to add really that I missed from the episode. So I will be back with episode 8, the finale, very soon. But I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.